Chapter 15. Captivity Day 20. Kali. They say all lamentics have their obsession. Kali may not be a lamentic, but her thirst for knowledge was insatiable just the same. Ojeran had been accommodating, and had helped her through what would otherwise have been a long night. The Kaylani Dominion, for all its faults, had its benefits. She couldn't imagine anywhere else in the universe where a conversation about reproductive anatomy would turn into a hands-on exploration. Each of them started off strange and alien to the other, but by the end of the evening, most of the strangeness had passed. The only significant thing that actually happened was him holding her while she slept. Kali was surprised nobody came to check on them, despite everything else going on. Her jailers probably expected something to happen, because that seemed to be the way they think. She just wanted a break from her isolation. After the morning meal, Ojeran left to attend to his daily duties. He told her he would return to check on her if permitted, but she suspected she'd never see him again. Kali didn't understand why he wanted a naked picture of her before leaving, but she didn't have a reason to object. He could just get an image from the security cameras. She wasn't the least bit shy, but it was nice of him to ask. The holographic tree and video screens had been off since they closed the hole in the ceiling. She'd had several opportunities to walk out just over the last day. She could dismantle the suppression field and force her way out at any time, which only served to deepen the feeling of futility. Labarth had multiple armies at his disposal and had been playing Kaylani like a puppet. She'd only seen him that once, but it was enough. She wondered how deep the rot went. Gao Rune wasn't involved, but what about the other acorn branches? Was Thelkar or Vershana? Kali frowned. When she took down Korbajani, she thought it would mean something. He had been part of plans put in motion before Kali's creation. It was naive of her to think installing Gao Rune in the role Thelkar and the others had set aside for him would earn her a modicum of respect. She was starting to think they had no intention to prevent the destruction of Hyrule. Maybe they don't even know? Had Labarth screwed up that prediction as well? She'd been in a good mood first thing that morning. When you're forced into an action, the darkness hunts your every thought. Hopefully, Samari would be able to make a difference. Kali wondered what that changeling mutation core did to the baby after. It had been 20 days, now. She worried how Ziku and Yari were handling the separation. If everything was going to plan, they should have plenty of pygmy cars on to play with, but they should be shipping out tomorrow, leaving her boys to entertain themselves in her absence. They tended to get destructive when they're bored. Maybe it had been selfish of her to adopt them. Maybe she should have looked for a Jagaltim settlement where their genetic deficit wouldn't. Maybe they would have been happier among their own. Is this the sort of life she can offer them? Kali wept. Gauri. Gauri stood looking out into space through a hallway-length interactive display. Tapping the window-like panel anywhere would bring up a terminal screen which could be repositioned or resized on a whim. She'd replayed the recording dozens of times, but refused to accept Taro was dead. Gauri had told her to destroy those drones, she was responsible for what happened. Trying to console her by pointing out she had incomplete knowledge hadn't helped. She appreciated Tyrell's efforts, but from beak to tail feathers, the fault was hers. She worked with Taro to design the mongoose. She was the one who balked when he questioned her design. The design console didn't come back with any errors or faults. He insisted on making changes, but she was the one who rejected his changes. In hindsight, Gauri should have looked through his modifications individually. She assumed it was a continuation of the argument over the communications rig. Everything had been fine until Taro fired. She'd reviewed the footage over and over again. The left rail gun fired. The ship spun out of control toward the dark mass within the distortion. Her target crumpled under the force of the impact, but the anomaly remained intact until the mongoose spun into the obscured mass. A piece of the small ship was sheared away as her ship vanished and the larger vessel manifested. Tyrell had said the ship that came through was an unregistered hull design weighing approximately 20,000 kilotons. It was a full starship of either flag or blockade runner class. They wouldn't know which until they were able to determine if the loadout was military or non-military. That ship had rapidly become the bane of their existence. It was too close to the array, and its automated defenses were still active. There were no conventional life signs, hailing it was pointless, and any attempt to connect to it with cyberpathy had resulted in brutal countermeasures. They were pinned down in their own fortress. The most they'd been able to do was reconfigure the array to keep the most important parts of the facility away from the foreign ship. They didn't know where in space it came from, but they knew who made it. Tyrell had nicknamed the vessel O'Gregor's Revenge. She was supposed to leave later today with a shipload of pygmy Karzon for the Nadrock system, but without their lead technician, TRO, and with the problems at the array, someone was going to have to contact Vakir's forces in the Kulkan system to let them know there had been a setback. Hoaru didn't impress Gowry. Hopefully, Vakir could keep him in line a little longer. Lady Darkseid had insisted that they let the Karzon liberate themselves. They'd provided ship designs and logistical support, but if their homeworld was to be freed, it must be by their own hands. The deck plates vibrated under her taloned feet. One of the twins must be headed her way. Whichever one it was, they were clomping around even heavier than usual. Gowry tapped the elongated screen and opened a connection to the command hub. Any news? Gowry squawked, as Tyrell's icon appeared on the screen. What part of presumed dead until I hear to the contrary, do you not understand? Tyrell sighed irritably. One of the twins is on the way, Gowry said. It's got to be Ziku, Tyrell grumbled. Yari just left here a couple minutes ago. I think we all need shore leave. At least you get to spend some time away from the station. This isn't how I expected to spend my retirement. The tech and resources at my disposal are fantastic, but I didn't sign on to be stranded out here. The old codger is more surly than usual today. What's the occasion? Gowry teased. Let me see. Yesterday, I had to lock myself in a cage to protect myself because Cyberop Gregor decides now is a good time to kick me in the dick. We lost someone who's essential to our plans. I'm still waiting to hear back from Pinky and her man Prask. You're just waiting for me to find Syntholo, then you're taking off, which will just leave me and the twins out here. No, I haven't located him. That entire system has been quarantined. He and Jake both fell off the map. I passed that information to Pinky, but she's not done a thing with it. In a few more days, there won't be a Loctarian homeworld left. I heard rumors that the parliamentary flock's getting involved in the fight against Cletheria, so they'll probably be next to go. The universe feels like it's tearing itself apart, and the one person who might have a chance to stop it is being held against her will. As if that's not enough, I just had to tell a 2-ton child that I have no idea when his mother will be back. The Kaylani Dominion has fleets, and loads of devoted followers and allies. What the fuck can I do? Ask them nicely to let her go? They were the ones funding her in the beginning. I can't just pay some ransom or trade for her. They've got her, and there isn't a damn thing I can do about it. Gowry lowered her head and looked away from the screen. Yari was standing at the end of the hallway, his fists clenched, his entire body trembling. He turned to run. I have to go, Gowry cawed urgently. 20 days, she heard Tyrell say as she bolted after Yari. Horu. Vakir sat behind a large makeshift desk covered in tablets, each with reports from different agents. He was an accomplished warrior, but insisted on spending most of his day like this, sorting through lists and reports. Hoaru didn't understand the point in most of it. This wasn't the work for a fleet admiral. He knew Vakir's mother had laid with an accountant to ensure intelligent children. His mother, Keru, had only a single litter of renown with Vakir's father. Unfortunately, the results of her breeding experiment were mixed. Admiral Vakir was the second most successful cub in his litter. His sister, Counselor Sarah, took over Karu's place on the ruling council after his mother passed. Then there's his inverse twin brother, Lorik, the disgrace of their nation, who abandoned their species to fraternize with aliens. The most famous Karzon, Baron Delorik, had no place for his own people or customs. During the greatest battle of their age, he issued false orders urging surrender just as they teetered on the brink of victory. Vakir looked up at him from behind his desk. "You have that look again. Speak your mind." "I've received news," Hoaru sneered. "Let me take out the fleet and prepare to lead the assault." "What's the news?" Vakir asked with a raised eyebrow. "I told you my feelings about this strategy," Hoaru growled. "Too many moving parts. Too many ways to fail. I've been contacted by the builder. There's been a delay. That white pygmy is missing. Probably hiding somewhere on that base of theirs, cowering. It's a mistake to rely on them. They're small and weak and we can't do this without them," Vakir said as he lowered the tablet he'd been reading. "If they say wait, we wait. Give me control of the fleet. We don't need them. This is a waste of our time," Hoaru insisted. Vakir rested his claws on the table and stared into his eyes. "The last time I wasted time with a group of pygmy Karzon, one of them made a friend who gave me the Starrunner X-42, introduced us to a ship designer, and helped us craft this plan. Feel free to tell me all about your assessment of the pygmy clans after you've made friends half as useful as they have been." "A million years ago, it was a member of the Firetail clan who brought fire down the mountain and saved us all. Without making a spectacle of themselves, they're saving us still. One day, you'll see it for yourself, if you live long enough. Now, go make yourself useful." Hoaru scoffed audibly. Vakir sat back and smiled. "Have I ever told you about the time I met my brother's crew?" Hoaru looked at him in confusion. "What does that have to do with anything?" "One of his crewmates was a Pashai. Have you ever met one?" Vakir smiled. "A what?" Hoaru asked. "Pashai, about quarter the size of a pygmy. Tiny little things, black fur, red eyes. Smart, crafty, and quick. Little thing kept an eye on everyone. It's a shame they're so rare. My brother had a pair of Kital working for him, too. Biggest, strongest beings in the whole universe. Each crew member had their purpose, just like everyone in the Resistance has their role. The reason I mention that Pashai is because the Kital could be replaced a lot easier. It may take 3 or 4 individuals, but they're just muscle," Vakir said emphatically. "It's the pygmies who keep the gears of war greased. We're just the muscle." "Oh, Jaren." He stepped off the shuttle onto the orbital station. Meeting up here was highly unorthodox, but everything about the last day had been. The Triad Confederacy wanted more information about the prisoner being held on the surface. This wasn't his role in society, but he'd been chosen by Adyarchs. If it could help improve his mate's standing in the order, he was willing to do his part. He'd spent over an hour talking with Azuri. She was a good woman, and hadn't taken issue with him spending the evening giving comfort to another woman. Adyarchs wasn't genetically compatible, so there was no reason for Azuri to take issue. He would never consider bearing young with another. He was her life-bread. If he died, she would mourn for 3 years before considering another. If she died, he'd become full-time military until the day his death. It's the cost of falling for a woman of the order. He helped her bear the burdens of the secrets she kept, and in exchange her secrets would die with him. He fidgeted with his cloak nervously while looking around for the woman he was supposed to be meeting. Ferrocene could change their scale color to camouflage themselves, but each had a natural color. His was deep teal, his contact was a red scale. They were supposed to relax their coloration prior to a formal meeting, but he didn't know her precise shade. This was incredibly important to Azuri, which was causing him a great deal of stress. Ojeran Follow, a figure in a long grey robe, whispered into his mind as they passed by him. Her nose was hidden under the cowl, but her tail was deep red, and the language was correct. Azuri had taught him the language spoken by the Order. It was a necessity. Sometimes a life-bred mate must pass a message when no one else is available. He followed her down a long hallway, deep into the station. She opened a small side room filled with cleaning supplies, and guided him inside with a playful grin. The woman's demeanor changed the moment the door had been closed behind them. She placed a small cylindrical device on one of the shelves and activated it. Anyone monitoring the station cameras are free to come to their own assumption, the woman said. The device will neutralize any monitoring devices. We can talk freely now. Ojeran sighed with relief. She was speaking the Pharisee native language. I am known as Navari. I am the Order's spymaster for this region. I'm going to give you your initial instructions. Before I say anything further, I want you to understand I'd prefer to leave this to a member of the Order. Happenstance has positioned you where we need an operative. You will gain nothing, personally, for your assistance. Any bonuses, commendations, or awards based on your actions will be bestowed upon your mate, and listed under her name, not yours. There will be no records of you having assisted the Order. Do you understand? I do this for Azuri, Ojeran nodded. This wasn't the first time he'd heard this speech, but Navari was the highest-ranked member of the Order he'd ever had direct contact with. It would help his family. That's what was important. If things went well enough, it could help Azuri bring another of his daughters into the Order. She'd let that slip when they spoke earlier. Knowing her, it was probably deliberate. Good, Navari said. We need information pertaining to the woman known as Lady Darkseid. She selected you to attend her needs during the current dilemma, so we're going to rely on you to bring us information on her. My people have been gathering what information we can, but we need more. Information will be shared with you only as it becomes necessary. I don't want believed knowns to affect your interpretation of potential unknowns. Every assessment has an interpretive bias. I need you to do this without being prejudiced by prior justifications or conclusions. I understand, he said. Is there any kind of information you'd like me to get? You're not trained for covert operations, Navari said coldly. Pushing for facts would likely make her suspicious. I'll direct Azuri to pass along rumors using the Order's standard light codes. They will be sent during your normal day job. I will not speak with you again directly, unless it's absolutely critical. Azuri will gather information from you during your normal correspondence. If we need you to meet with a local operative, she'll arrange it. I do have some questions, Ojeran said, trying not to sound nervous. I'll try to work the answers into rumors you can bring up later today. What are your questions? Navari asked. I'm not sure that will help, he said. Some strange things came up last evening. She doesn't seem to have a firm grasp of why she's here. She said she was invited here, then imprisoned. The measures they've taken seem extreme. If she's that dangerous, why hasn't she tried to escape? Slow down, Navari said sternly. Sorry, he said apologetically. She's just so confusing. How does she know the language spoken by the Order? Why did she want to see all the pictures of Kaylani in my collection, and why did she keep asking me if they look like the same woman? Stop, Navari said. He waited quietly. The language spoken by the Order wasn't created by us, Navari said slowly. We learned it from the Johnny. If you want to know where she learned it, that's something to ask her. Okay, what about the pictures? He asked. I can't answer that, Navari said with a smile. One of the benefits of marrying into the Order was learning to hear the subtext. Navari knew the answer, but it was a secret she couldn't share. Do you know why she's being confined? Both the official and unofficial reason, Navari chuckled. Officially it is because she attacked the Xenon colony and nearly wiped them out. Yes, that woman is dangerous. Can you tell me the unofficial? Remember what I said about biases, Navari cautioned. I'll keep that in mind. The Kaylani Dominion Seer has predicted the fall of their nation, Navari said with a shrug. They believe she's the catalyst. We've been unable to get any specifics. Our oracles used their own methods to investigate the claim and came back with a rather peculiar conclusion. Ojeran looked at her expectantly. That's why we've enlisted your help, Navari grinned. Trying to make predictions involving Lady Darkseid will return irrational results. Try to get into her head, figure out what you can, report back. Before you leave, I'll give you today's rumor. They say she's the Cletharian queen. Really? Ojeran gasped. Who knows? That's the rumor, Navari grinned broadly. The Cletharian assault on Fellowship space must be a factor in their current interest. I know you were concerned about third-party influences, but can I mention these rumors to other members of the planetary support team? It's your choice, Navari shrugged. Let me tell you a story. A Lamentic girl passed through here last week. One of my people conducted the strip search to make sure she didn't have a leech. She told security she was a runaway child. We had her wear a tracker and sent her on her way. I could give you a list of every location she stopped. She visited Darkseid while she was on the surface. Local security handled the situation by being confrontational. They concluded the woman's Tejmare is a Lamentic child, just above legal age, not a threat or someone to be concerned with. They're wrong, but I work with them, not for them. My people looked deeper into the short woman's story. The supposed child is actually a Lamentic criminal who's at least 120 years of age. If you accept everything at face value, you'll never find the truth. The entire time Darkseid has been here she hasn't even said her Tejmare's name once, not even in her sleep, but I know who she is. It didn't take much effort to find out. The information has been under their nose from the day Darkseid arrived, they just didn't pay enough attention to see it. All the pieces come together when you stop thinking you have the answers. How can you be so sure? Navari pulled out her tablet and brought up an image of two women flying together. One of them had the white hair and skin typical of Lamentics. There were black wings strapped to her back. The woman she was carrying had the distinctive tails and markings of Lady Darkseid. The wings, Ojeran said with a start, are those the Ullervikal? Put it away in your mental vault, Navari instructed. Let's not sour good relations. I will. Good. Do that, then return to your duties. Section break. His trip back to the surface was stressful. Azuri had warned him this would happen. Making his meeting with Navari look like a fling was the easiest way to prevent undue suspicion. If they were expecting to meet like this several more times, it would be less of a problem for him. An occasional pairing draws different conclusions than a singular event. The same coworkers giving him a knowing look today would wonder tomorrow which of them performed poorly enough to ensure no further interaction between them. Claiming it was her failure would be disrespectful, insisting the failure was his own would lead to endless course recommendations. If he simply claimed it wasn't what he really wanted, word would eventually get back to Adyarxie's wardens. He spent the evening holding Adyarxie while she slept after hours of a somewhat mechanical exploration of each other's genitalia. It was neither sexual or lusty. For that matter, despite her being a bit of a flirt, he didn't sense any actual attraction between them. It wouldn't take much for the people charged with monitoring the woman to jump to conclusions. Navari had warned him about biases. She said she runs each day. All it had taken to connect with her was to join her once. Why hadn't the people observing her made the offer? They probably could have stayed on the opposite side of the field and achieved the same result. In order to maintain his citizenship status, Ogeron will be required to perform an additional 140 hours of service. Only 10 hours could be applied over the course of any normal day. Until the situation with Aspis was resolved, no day would be normal. Then again, being permitted to visit Adarxi would break up his remaining days nicely. Jogging with her every afternoon wasn't much to ask. Getting to know someone new sounded refreshing. By the midpoint of his service term, he usually wondered if dual citizenship was worth the hassle, but he always finished for the sake of the bonus pay it entitled him to. This year he was actually looking forward to it. Serving in a way that actually improved someone's life, for a change, was refreshing. Azuri was supportive of his choice to dedicate himself to the task of spending his remaining time in the service of Adarxi. Hopefully, the local authority would agree to his ongoing assignment request. Even if they didn't, he planned to schedule his midday break running with the enigmatic woman. The timing of his meeting with Navari had been unfortunate. Adarxi ran alone, again, today. The Kailani Dominion is a nation known for catering to every need of its visitors and inhabitants. Their handling of her violated everything they stood for. If she was to be the catalyst of their downfall, a moment of kindness could change all that. Once the eggs had been laid, why would you be surprised when they begin to hatch? Maybe they were showing her the real Dominion. Ogeron wondered if the Kailani everyone saw was the result of another bias. That woman had needs, and he planned to do his part to ensure they were tended to. After landing on the surface, he headed straight to his quarters at the barracks to change. His afternoon assignment was on Flesh Row, making sure the system visitors didn't cause any problems for the sex industry workers. It was an assignment he normally avoided, but half of his team was helping monitor the defense grid in response to the LAN activation. He picked it up first thing in the morning for her sake, not his own. Live sex performers, prostitutes, and classes. There was a broad variety of professionals. He'd taken a naked picture of Adarxi before parting ways with her. In addition to his normal duties, he hoped to find someone more appropriate for her to spend time with if she had additional needs to be met. With any luck, it would prevent her observers from thinking there was more to his desire to spend time with her than was merited. Azuri had teased him mercilessly when he mentioned the idea to her. In hindsight, she may have asked him to forward her the image to verify Navari's suspicions that Adarxi was the other woman in the image she'd shown him earlier. The chemicals released during physical interactions tend to have a calming effect. Simply holding Adarxi for the evening had helped to calm and comfort her. Hopefully, a more intense experience of the sort would have a more lasting effect. Over the course of their conversation, she mentioned she'd been with males and females, and pointed out that, being unique, anyone she's with was technically going interspecies. He didn't ask for any specifics, or mention he intended to show up later in the evening with a collection of images of prospective sexual partners. Ogeron scolded himself for not contacting the team overseeing her to get approval to bring her a visitor. He sent a quick note to the woman in charge of her care before heading off to work. It would be better if he could just take her out of the confinement area for a while, but that was unlikely to be approved, despite the fact she hadn't even attempted to escape once the prior day. He added it to the end of the note as an idea that could help her see the Dominion more favorably. There weren't many guards available, so even if they did consider it, it would have to wait. Shortly before arriving at Flesh Row, his tablet beeped. Ogeron chuckled quietly as he looked down at the response to his message. It read, "Just do what you think is best." With all the emergency reassignments, apparently, someone hadn't been properly briefed. He wasn't sure what to do. They'd called away her regular guards yesterday. He could just walk in and get her, if whoever was still watching her lowered the force field for him. The idea of bringing her along for his 5-hour shift amused him, but it would cause problems for whoever sent him that reply, not to mention both him and her. It would go far to prove they didn't need to keep her confined, as long as she was willing to cooperate. Then again, taking the woman out on the town for 5 hours of making sure nobody caused problems for the flesh merchants may not sit well with her. Even if he headed to get her right now, he'd be a little late to start his shift. He pulled over and stopped the car. He needed to decide. Bring her along now, or hope they didn't discover their error before his shift ended. He turned around and sped off to pick her up. The government wasn't about to offer visitors to the system a refund or turn away their business. The bus schedule had been adjusted, and they reduced the number of cabs in operation, which meant more foot traffic, but fewer vehicles on the road. The local news had reassured everyone, repeatedly, that the heightened security was just a precaution. Cyberop Gregor was in control of Aspis. There was no logical reason for him to launch LAMS at any of the systems in targeting range. The missile array being activated may have just been a glitch from some system upgrade. This panic was completely unnecessary, but it led to him meeting Adyarxie, and his chance to improve her situation while serving the Order, so their paranoia had served him well. The roads on his way to the special confinement area were clear enough that he arrived in record time. The main doors were still unguarded, although he was sure they were being monitored by someone, somewhere. He parked the car and walked to the main door as casually as he could manage, while trying to hurry. After getting inside, he rushed over to the force field wall. Adyarxie was sitting on the floor. She still hadn't gotten dressed, and looked like she'd been crying. She hadn't looked up once since he'd entered. He slapped his tail on the floor to get her attention. "I'm sorry I missed our run today," Ojeran said softly. "I need you to get dressed before we leave." "Leave?" she said in surprise. "Get dressed quickly," he urged. "I'm getting you out of here for 5 hours. I'll explain on the way." She rushed over and started pulling clothing out of her drawers. "You have a mask," he said happily as she pulled out a fox mask. "Bring that too." She gathered her things as quickly as she could, and rushed to meet him at the border of the force field. "I need you to lower the force field," he said loudly. "I've been instructed to retrieve something." The moment the field was down, he pulled her across the threshold and instructed them to raise it again. "Kali." It took her a moment to get her internal bearings as her abilities all reactivated. She felt a little woozy until the sensation passed. She sat down, just outside the field, and slid on her split-sole shoes. He held a finger in front of his mouth and made a soft noise to hush her. "I've got it covered," she said. There was a faint echo as she spoke. "I've isolated the sound waves in our proximity." She slid on her mask and held her top against her chest as her tails rushed to tie it in place. "Mind helping tie me up?" she said as she held out her sarong to him. He lowered his head and chuckled as he took the garment from her. "You may want to be more cautious who you say that to in the future." "It's just you and me right now," Kali smiled knowingly. "That mystrionic translating ability of yours is working this time, so I thought I'd get an early start on flirting." "It's called tongues," he said. "The ability, I mean." "That's the spirit," she giggled. "Just tie around my black tail in the back, then we can strap a brown tail to each hip." "We have to leave right away," he said emphatically. "Fine. I'll deal with them later." She coiled a brown tail around each leg while he tied the knee-length sarong around her waist with the knot just above her black tail. It wasn't as artful as when Sin Tholo had done it, but it would work. "I have a 5-hour shift, so I thought I'd bring you along. I didn't think you'd mind." "Why would I?" she asked merrily as they rushed to the exit. "I'll have to bring you back once my shift is over," he said firmly. "I'm taking a big risk, but I'm willing to trust you." "So, no escorts, no guards, no snipers, nobody clearing civilians from the shops? Just you and me?" she said, trying to hide her excitement. "That's the idea," he said as they paused at the door. Just keep looking straight forward until we're in the car. I will, she said eagerly as he opened the door. She dropped her sonic field once they got outside. They walked to the car without talking. She looked straight forward, a half step behind him, as they walked to the car. She had the impression he was trying to keep her from being easily identified by cameras in the area or satellites overhead. Her heart was racing. She expected guards to jump out and stop them from leaving, but none appeared. He seemed like the sort who would have opened the door for her under a normal situation, but this clearly wasn't. How much trouble are you going to get in for this? Kali asked once they were both in the car. He pulled out his tablet, hit a few buttons, then handed it to her. Wow, Kali said as he backed up and started down the road. Lilac's going to be pissed. I'm just glad you decided that this is what's best. Thank you. Whoever sent that message will get in more trouble than me, and whoever briefed them will get even more than that. As long as there aren't any major incidents, hopefully, this will teach everyone you're worthy of being given a little freedom. Even if they only trust you under my supervision, it's something. It would be nice if we could at least move our daily run to the outside perimeter. Our daily run, she asked playfully, if you'll have me, he said as they turned down a side street. I'd like that, she said as she surreptitiously looked through his tablet. She wanted to believe him, but with everything she'd dealt with since her arrival, it didn't come easily. At a quick glance, most of his incoming messages seemed to be work-related. One from earlier in the day had an attached file, which made it stand out from the others. She waited until he was accelerating to open up the message. The attached file was the photo he'd taken of her before leaving in the morning. It was addressed to someone named Azuri Estrau. Judging from the avatar by the name, it was another Pharisine. Her curiosity got the best of her. She scrolled up to see why they were saying about her. Her eyes paused on a single line of text. It was written in the ancient dialogue they'd been speaking together the prior evening. Who's Azuri? Kali tried not to sound upset. Give me that, he said as he snatched his tablet out of her hand. I'd appreciate an answer. After what I just saw, Kali was unable to hide her emotions that time. The closest Terran term would be wife. Kali's first instinct was to doubt him and challenge his statement, but it was certainly possible. Cyanide and she had an agreement about those sorts of things. So, your wife was asking if you wanted to have sex with me? She was just teasing me, he said dismissively. I thought it was some guy friend, but somehow that makes it worse. She doesn't care as long as it's not someone I could have offspring with. That's not what I meant, she grumbled. He slowed down as they approached a parking area. What's bothering you? No chance of that, Kali said as if she were reading it aloud. I know we're different, but I didn't think you found me repulsive. Ojeran glanced over at her and smirked as they pulled into a parking spot. Are you saying you want to have sex? He chuckled as he finished parking. I didn't say that, Kali countered. And I didn't say I was disgusted by you. You're nice. Maybe once we know each other better I might consider, Kali muttered. Ojeran laughed heartily. Adyarchie, there's a whole list of things about women I'll never understand, and that's one of them. You spend time with a woman you have no chemistry with. The moment you let them know you have no intention to sleep with them, they make it their mission to change your mind. I'm really not like that, Kali objected. Good, he chuckled softly. You don't want to have sex. I don't want to have sex. So can we agree to not have sex together?
Yeah.
Kali blushed brightly. Oh, since you can say it correctly now, would you mind calling me Kali, in public? Not a problem, he said with a smile. They both got out of the car. What kind of shift am I helping with? She asked nervously as she stared at the Flesh Row Street sign. We'll be making sure everything stays consensual. Like us consenting to not fuck? Yes, he chuckled. Just like that. You can explore a little, but I'll need to know where you are at all times. Sorry if it's more of that. What did you call it? Extorted consent? If someone asks me where you are, I just need to be able to answer. I understand, Kali said as they walked together to the main road. I'll probably just stay wherever you are. I hope not, Ojeran grinned. There's actually lots to do on Flesh Row. We'll be out here for 5 hours. I hope you can at least find something that catches your interest. Actually, would you mind exchanging contact information so you can contact me if you need to? It's right here, she said as she gripped her pendant. All the workers and merchants have digital contact cards, he said as he tapped his tablet against the gemstone-shaped storage device. If you come across anyone you would like me to try to arrange time with, make sure to pass me their card, and I'll see if I can arrange something. I don't know if they'll allow it, but at least I can try. Why are you doing all this for me? Kali sounded more suspicious than she intended, but he didn't bat an eye. I like you, he shrugged. You're not like everyone else. It's the tails, isn't it? She teased as she flicked her black tail behind her. I get bonus pay for having dual citizenship, he snickered. Too much of this place annoys me. It's nice to have someone I can complain around for a change. There are other reasons, of course, but that's a big one. What are the other reasons? Kali smiled playfully. The tail, right? Nope, I've completely forgotten about you massaging my tail during our run yesterday, Ojeran chuckled. I'd never tail flirted before, Kali said as they approached the door to one of the local establishments. Pharisine liked to keep our hands free, he said. We don't usually hold tails that far up, or that tight. That's part of why I needed to talk to Azuri. What you did is something we consider extremely intimate. Oh, I'm sorry, Kali stammered, It's all right. You didn't know, he said. I told her what you said about not having full control of your tails, just to make sure it wouldn't be a problem if it happened again. That's partially why she was teasing me. I only glanced at the messages, she admitted. I just read a few words. I hope she wasn't upset. If being around me is a problem, I understand. I'll be right back, he said as he stepped inside the building. She glanced up at the awning and looked through the window as he spoke with the receptionist. It was apparently a high-end, appointment-only, fetish-wear boutique. From the window displays, it looked like they specialized in corsets. Male corsets were displayed in the left window, female on the right. He was in there for only about 2 minutes. The high-end shops don't have the sort of problems we patrol to protect against. We call them touchstones. There's one for each block. If any of the shops on their block has a serious problem, they send a runner to their touchstone, which contacts their assigned patrol. We're short-staffed today, so it's just me covering 4 of the 5 blocks, Ojeran explained. All the merchants on Block 5 have their own full-time staff to keep an eye on their patrons, but they're basic brothels. What kind of stores are the other 3 touchstones? Kali asked. He pointed each of them out as they continued down the street. There's the Playhouse, at the end of Flesh Row. They have live sex shows, but they're more focused on theatrical and burlesque performances. Everything's on or above the stage. There's no audience interaction. The big, green, square building over there is the next one. The one without a name on it. It's a daycare that's used more by the workers than visitors. The last one is the toy box, on the opposite side of the street. That one should be fairly self-explanatory. They sell props for individuals and couples. You know how I feel about at least one piece of their inventory. There's some real high-end stuff through the back curtain that you may want to take a look at. Like what? Top-tier items for very special clients, Ojeran said as if he were telling her a secret. Harnesses with full sensory input that emulate the physiology of other species. Those don't offend you, Kali teased. Everything connects with sensors. They can't do ferrocene or chalig right. We both have two, he said with a faint grin. Can they do female ferrocene? They have two clits, what would be the point? Lucky them, Kali grumbled. Sorry, he said, I forgot you. I technically do have one, Kali blushed. It's just really hard to get to. It would take too much effort to explain. Well, there is one way, but that's my secret. Is it something I need to be concerned about? He asked. Not without a much better sound system, she teased. He shrugged off her comment as they continued his rounds. Ogeron's tablet sounded a long, irritating tone. He tapped the screen to silence the noise and checked the message. Feel free to go explore, he said. I'll let you know when I'm done taking care of this. I'm going, too, Kali insisted. It's a small shop, he said as they walked briskly down the street. The person renting it has problems with visitors all the time. The locals all seem to like them. Great all-around person, from what I've been told. I've never met them, personally. They're what we call a hands-on sex trainer. The people who go in there to cause problems are usually the sort who don't read the fine print, or bother to learn which kinks are which. He pointed to the front door of a small shop a few dozen yards away. Tuta-futa, Kali said in confusion. I don't get it. I'll let the merchant explain it once we're there, he chuckled softly. After 20 days without access to her mystic abilities, she felt odd. The elements were eager to respond to her will. Her consciousness seemed to waver, like ripples on the surface of a pond. Her body's movements felt constrained, just within the boundaries of her control. This must be the consequence of tapping the Queen's mark without having access to the elaborate lattice of disciplines of a battle mage. Maintaining her inner balance should feel as natural as breathing, but the longer things continued like this, the higher the likelihood of losing control completely. She had no idea what that would look like and didn't want to find out. When she returns to her cell, she'd have to deactivate the suppression field, spend more time meditating, and take the risk of being discovered. She'd have to keep out anyone who could reveal her secret. She hoped she could trust Ogeron. She'd need at least one ally here. As they crossed the street, a canninoid rushed towards them from a store 2 doors down from their destination. I need to talk to you. I'm on a call, Ogeron said as he started walking by. I'm one of the runners, they said urgently. They were with a client, and some guy came in and started yelling, making all kinds of threats. It was reported by a passerby. I only feel 2 people in there, Kali said. She refocused her eyes and looked at the windows. She could see a weak orange glow inside. Glancing over at Ogeron, she saw a faint green glow around him. He only had a weak mystrionic talent, probably a lesser knack. The cyberpath who was emitting the orange glow was probably just a minor, but... Hey, Ogeron, can cyberpaths enable the firing mechanism on guns? I really don't know. Maybe, he said. Telepaths can't feel the minds of cyberpaths. They don't have surface thoughts. Please stay right there. I'll bring him out, Kali insisted. His thoughts were so loud they were impossible to not hear. He didn't want her to, didn't see this as her responsibility, but had been told she was dangerous and was curious. I need to vent some excess power. Just let me, she thought directly into his mind. Nobody gets hurt, he thought with clarity. He was obviously used to dealing with telepaths. Azuri probably was one for him to be that accustomed to making sure his thoughts were heard. I hadn't crossed her mind how clear he'd kept his thoughts earlier. He must have had some training. She unfurled her tails and hurried to the front door of Tuta-futa while monitoring the 2 minds she could feel inside. They were clearly distressed. The door was barred and locked from the inside. There was a stairwell just on the other side of the glass. Kali rested her hand lightly on the closed door and passed a vibration through the glass. She felt the vibration pass through an inner door to the left and up the staircase. She used the sound wave to map the interior. There were 3 people inside. They were all upstairs in a 10 by 14 apartment-style room. Using a sonar-like power didn't give her the clearest view, but there seemed to be 2 women being held at gunpoint. She swiftly sent a second pulse through the door. The armed assailant had a pistol in one hand and a narrow object in the other. One of the women was trying to keep her body between the pistol and the other woman's body. There were dozens of ways she could approach the problem, but with her abilities pulling at the reins of her control, she'd have to use as little force as possible. Glass is an amorphous solid, so it was easy to make passable if you know how. The single pane of glass responded with minimal urging. She reached though and pulled out the horizontal bar which was holding the door closed, pulled it through the closed door, and rested it next to the brickwork near the door handle. She didn't want to trip any sensors on the door, so she stepped through the glass into the building and re-solidified it behind her. I won't take long, Kali thought to Ajaran as she silently sped up the stairs. She stopped just outside the wooden door to review her options. The immediate goal was to prevent the gunman from shooting anyone. That seemed easy enough. She gently reached for the mind of the woman who was trying to keep her body between the gun and the other woman. I'm here to help. I need to borrow your eyes. Even without training, a person's psyche will resist attempts to form an external link or bond. All the woman needed to do was relax for a couple seconds and accept the link, but she was too frantic. Kali retreated from her mind, reached into the other woman's thoughts, and tried again. The other person immediately wanted to know what they needed to do and accepted the mental link. Using their vision as an extension of her own line of sight, Kali established a telekinetic barrier, partitioning the room between the 2 women and the gunman. I put up a barrier. You're safe. Thank you, the person on the other end of the link thought. Before I disconnect the psionic link, Kali thought, sonar showed you being shaped like a woman, but over the connection I can tell you have. That can wait. Kali put up a second telekinetic wall between the attempted assailant and the door, then severed the link. I'm coming in now, Kali said. I'll shoot, he said. Please don't. The ricochet is a real bitch. He started firing as she opened the door. Several shots, and a moment of screaming later, he was struck in the right leg by one of his own shots. Being held captive isn't fun, Kali said irritably as she sat on a couch just outside the 2 force walls isolating the shooter. I'd rather not send someone to a cell today. How about you unlock the front door, Cyberpath, so the guy I'm helping out today can come up? Let's try and resolve this? He shot himself, Kayla thought to Ajaran, but everything is fine otherwise. I'm going to try and get him to open the door for you. Just meet us upstairs. I've split the room into 3 chambers, Kali said. Until we get this sorted out, everyone is stuck where they are. Can you adjust them? The tall blonde woman said. He's hurt. I should go to him. What if he hurts you? Kali asked. I would never hurt her, he insisted. If my barrier didn't hold you could have shot her, Kali said scornfully. She's not the one I was trying to shoot, he said angrily. I suppose I could, if I'm careful. There are some supplies in the washroom that can help stop the bleeding, the voluptuous brunette said. I'll just add it to your bill. While mentally linked, she had seen the blonde, so it was the brunette who let her use their eyes. After they were done settling their dispute, Kali hoped she'd have a chance to talk to the brunette. They had all the physical traits of a woman and one additional part tucked away under their skirt. She couldn't help but wonder if a situation like this would make it through Cyanide's sexual partner loophole. Kali smiled at her own word choice. Okay, I'm ready, the blonde said. She was holding several towels and alcohol with a label that read, "For external use only, do not drink," on the front. "Cyberpath, unlock the front door while I adjust the fields," Kali said in a commanding tone. Kali adjusted the location and angles of the fields while he was mentally distracted with the door. The blonde rushed to his side as soon as they were told the fields had been moved. Kali watched her tend his injury while waiting for Ojeran to arrive. She may have looked through some information on local policies, but he knew what he was doing and she didn't. She telepathically explained the telekinetic wall situation to him before he made it into the room. "What's the situation?" Ojeran asked as he walked over and tried to sit on the couch next to Kali. The couch wasn't designed for thick-tailed species, so he was having difficulties getting comfortable until Kali scooted forward and quietly invited him to slide his tail behind her. It took a little time for them to go through the basics. The brunette was Trudy, the proprietress. The blonde was one of her customers. Her name was Lucille. The cyberpath was her fiancé, Gary. Gary had trust issues, and had become enraged when he discovered the Tuttafuta charges in her purchase history. Lucille insisted she was coming here for weekly training sessions, but Gary was convinced it was an affair because of rather specific activities she'd stopped performing with him. From the sounds of it, she'd cheated on him at least once in the past, and their upcoming nuptials were making him more suspicious than normal. Their situation didn't sound very healthy to Kali, but she wasn't the one in the relationship. There were apparently lozenges that help suppress a person's gag reflex, but Lucille insisted they made it hard for her to swallow. That's where Trudy entered the scenario. Lucille was coming here for a very specific kind of training. Despite having a penis, Trudy was female. She identified by that gender and lacked testicles. Lucille chose her specifically for that reason. She'd ceased oral activities with Gary because it was uncomfortable for her, even with the lozenges. She was coming to Tuttafuta for training so she could give him a special gift on their wedding night. By the time they'd all talked it out, Gary, deservedly, felt like an ass. He'd discharged his weapon, so despite everything being talked out and resolved, Ojeran had to call this into planetary security. Gary's illegally modified firearm had to be confiscated. Trudy agreed to bill them for damages to the shop and not press further charges. He was employed locally, a contracted position. The governing body was going to garnish his wages until he'd paid off a rather steep fine for each shot fired. Kali lied in her estimation of the number of shots taken. If these two were going to get married, they'd need all the help they could get. Kali understood why the locals like Trudy, after all that, would offer to let them use the room so Lucille could show him what she'd learned, as long as they were out in time for her to prep for her next appointment. Ojeran, Kali, and Trudy adjourned to the downstairs office after leaving the couple alone upstairs. The downstairs office had a strong Shamfarian motif. Her desk was made of light-colored wood. The adjoining chamber looked like it had been set up for a tea ceremony. There were 2 low stools in front of the desk and a closed locker behind it. "Are you new?" Trudy asked. "I just brought her along for a change of scenery," Ojeran said before Kali could answer. Trudy glanced at him. "I didn't see a collar." "Let the woman answer." "I'm not with security," Kali said meekly. "They're short-staffed, so I'm helping." "That's good news," Trudy smiled deviously. "I'd love to have an assistant. I've been watching your tails moving around since you walked into the room up there." Kali blushed. "How would you feel about shaving one of them?" Trudy inquired. Kali swiftly coiled her twin tails around her legs. "I guess that's a no," Trudy said with an exaggerated pout. "My Tejmare likes all my tails just the way they are," Kali said with a broad grin. "She's the only one I let touch the black tail. That one gets a little stabby when it's mishandled." She showed off her stinger to demonstrate. Trudy leaned across the desk. "Would you be willing to indulge me for a moment? I'd like to know what you look like under that mask." It looks fitted. Are you wearing it to hide a scar? It was a gift, Kali said as she raised it onto the top of her head. I went out to a club with a pair of cannonoid friends. One of them had it custom fit for me so we could be 3 bitches out for the night. More stripes, Trudy said as she motioned to Kali's cheeks. You have an interesting look. I can't tell what species you were before all the body work. I didn't have any, Kali said while maintaining eye contact with the woman. Don't ask her, Ojeran said swiftly. The answer is classified. Kali relaxed her posture and lowered her mask. His instincts were good. If asked, she might have answered. Speaking of that mask, that runner I spoke with earlier has some questions. We should get going, Ojeran said. She told me she had questions for me, and I certainly have more questions for her, Trudy said with a smile. I need to get back out there, Ojeran thought with clarity. Go ahead. I'll try to be quick, Kali thought to him. Don't worry, I'll be careful what I say. Tejmare, Trudy said warmly. I was going to offer you a free 1-hour course, to thank you for all your help earlier. I have a comprehensive list of courses to choose from. I'm sure you'll find something that could be helpful to you and yours, even if you are only interested in women. I'll be heading back to work, Ojeran said as he stood up and turned to the door. Wait for me, Kali said. At least take my card, the woman said. I will, Kali said as she grabbed the electronic contact card from Trudy and rushed to Ojeran's side. You got spooked pretty quick, he said after they'd both gotten outside. I haven't felt lust that intensely for a while, Kali said. I didn't like it then, and I don't like it now. I could even tell what she wanted. There was no mental image attached to it. When it comes to Terran types, I'm more attracted to women. A woman with a cock sounded fun, but I don't care how attractive someone is. Lust that intense is always a major turnoff. Well, almost always. Almost, he quipped as they continued down the street together. What's the exception? Bloodlust really yanks my tail, Kali said just loud enough to be heard. It probably wasn't a real Pharisine expression, but she was confident he'd get her meaning. Between all that and a tail you can't fully control, I'm starting to think bringing you here may have been a bad idea. Is that ever a problem with your Tejmare? Lamentic emotions don't have that kind of intensity. They're just different, Kali shrugged. I should be fine here, unless you were hoping to turn me on? He stopped walking, entered something into his tablet, then continued. What was that? Kali asked. Just something I had to share with Azuri. Interesting timing, Kali snorted. His tablet beeped just as the runner they'd met earlier approached them. Ma'am, the runner said. He seemed nervous. Your mask is really well fitted. Would you mind telling me where you bought it? It was a gift from a friend who works at Alliance Arms. They have my measurements on file. She had it customized. His mind was racing. He was worried she was going to ask why he wanted to know. She could venture a guess. There are things Terran women could do that Cayman and Lupian mouths just weren't suited for. If he wasn't into Terrans, a form-fitting mask could provide just the illusion he needed. Any high-end dress shop can get the precise measurements. You'll just buy a classic Shamfarian fox mask and have it altered to the measurements. That's all my friend did. Thank you, he said with appreciative relief, then rushed off. Kali, Ojeran said while holding his tablet toward her. He must have mentioned her "oh yanks my tail" comment to Azuri. Her response was interesting. That was a new one, he laughed softly. I had to share it. No yanking, but a good squeeze and fine, Kali said, quoting Azuri's message. You told me about something you don't like, Ojeran said. Fair is fair. The interaction confused her a little. She felt like Azuri was encouraging her to try to start something, Or maybe she just seemed like a safe option on a planet full of indulgences. She shrugged it off as they continued patrolling Flesh Row. They stopped in several shops together. He seemed to be judging her responses to some of the various venues and workers. He was up to something, but he was keeping his mind clear. None of the clients paid any attention to her, which was refreshing. They all seemed to know what they were here for, and with her at his side, they understood she wasn't on the menu. Then again, maybe the fox mask was throwing them off? She did grab the digital cards for a couple of the shops offering courses. Cyan had mentioned there were some things Lamentic women wouldn't do. Though, from her story about Talshi, they may not do them, but they certainly enjoyed them. Kali hoped to have a few surprises in store for the next time they were together, if Kaylani ever let her go. Ojeran noticed the shift in her mood, suggested she spend some time looking around on her own for a few minutes, and pointed out a lounge-style club with live sex stage performances. She agreed, went inside, sat at a table near the back, and composed messages for Tyrell to pass on to both of her adopted sons. After having spent 3 hours with Ojeran, she felt confident she wasn't being watched, and was comfortable being open with the content of her messages for the first time. Tyrell was quick to caution her that lightwave transmitters maintain message logs. He was even able to identify the cyberpath who was administrating the region she was in, which provoked her to send a rather elaborate message to Tyrell talking about the mission to Farpoint Station when she met a cyberpath named Jax, back when she was called Kayla and was borrowing Bruja's body. She was pretty sure Tyrell would have no idea what she was talking about, but he should be used to that by now. Tyrell startled her by asking her if it was the same Jax she mentioned when she came to after being knocked out at the Nadrock colony site, and commented the guy must have left quite an impression. Kali was impressed. She'd forgotten all about that. Tyrell not only remembered but seemed to know just what she was up to. She made a point of mentioning how much she wanted Jax back then. Tyrell scolded her for talking to him like that, insisting she was like a daughter to him and her adopted kids were like his grandkids. Tyrell had gotten even sneakier over the last couple weeks. I guess I shouldn't mention the dirty things I do to him if I ever ran into him again, Kali sent back in hopes of annoying Tyrell and getting Jack's attention. Kali knew Jax was a hornball, even if she wasn't capable of feeling his emotions. Tyrell told her he was disconnecting. She told him it was just unfinished business that was long overdue, but the message wasn't delivered. Kali raised her mask until she finished off her drink. There was no way to be positive Jack had seen the conversation, but he struck her as the type who would keep an eye out for mentions of his name. Then again, Tyrell did keep an eye out for mentions of his pseudonym, Shadowfac. A lot had changed since then, and Kivaza had different tastes than Kayla. Trudy had offered her a free lesson. Maybe she offered lessons on how to convincingly fake an orgasm. If not, Kiryu may be able to offer her some pointers. Kali imagined Kiryu saying, "Fine, I came, now will you get the fuck off me," and started giggling to herself. She missed all the people she cared about, and suspected Ojeran's name would be the next to be added to the list. Inviting him and his wife out to dance some night could be fun, as long as nobody played any songs by a Girl. That was reserved for visits with Miyako. He may have been Kayla's playmate, but he and Taro were both fun to be around and were fuzzy bundles of energy on the dance floor. Next time she went to Club 9th she was going to bring her boys, even if she had to freeze the high tower to do it. Kali sighed deeply and muttered, "I'll never see any of them unless they set me free. At least Kayla's free. Well, saw Mari now, I guess. Damn it. For a couple hours, I felt like a real person." She could hear the moans of the performers, the occasional clink of ice in a glass, drinks being poured, scattered whispers, and the occasional sounds of flirtation and merriment. She didn't know how large a hive mind she could control without losing her own mind. Dropping control abruptly would kill everyone she was connected to. All she had to do was. "No," Kali said in a soft shuddering voice. "Not again. Some of them are innocent. How many are like Ojeran? She left the remainder of her drink on the bar, lowered her mask, got up, and walked away. By the time she stepped back onto the street, her entire body felt like it was vibrating. She opened up her contact list, enabled thought to text mode, and sent a message to Tyrell as she staggered over to a bench and sat down. She felt like her last vestiges of control were slipping away. Being put down after losing control, releasing her inner chaos, didn't seem so bad. Her communicator beeped. She'd received an incoming contact data packet. The associated name was Samari Kali. She accepted it after a moment's consideration. "I was worried you wouldn't accept," a woman said with relief. "I'm using Sam's ID to keep my name off their lips. Kivaza, my love, my princess. Tyrell forwarded me that message you sent him. I love you should never sound like goodbye. That's just not allowed. Talk to me. Please." Kali's bottom lip quivered as Cyanide's voice spoke in her ear.